At the start of the 1920s, the United States was building 6 battlecruisers: the Lexington, Constellation, Saratoga, Ranger, Constitution, and United States. But these were all cancelled with the Washington Naval Treaty, which was probably just as well, considering the alternative would have been a high-speed tin can full of explosives with the name United States plastered all over it. Anyway, at the time, the Lexington and Saratoga were the most advanced in construction, and so they were designated for conversion into aircraft carriers to prevent the loss of all the invested money. There were some advantages and some disadvantages to converting a battlecruiser instead of building a purpose-designed carrier, but it was the cost savings that tipped the balance. The next issue was displacement. The ships were designed to displace over 43,000 tons, and even without the main battery and superstructure, the exception for converted ships only extended to 33,000 tons, and these ships were looking at about 35,000 tons. So they just lied about it and said they weighed 33,000 tons anyway. And with that small detail out of the way, a huge hangar was installed. With a height of 20 feet inside, it would not be exceeded until second-generation supercarriers of the 1950s. A pair of aircraft lifts on the centerline allowed for their air groups to travel between the flight deck and hangar, and initially a flywheel-powered catapult was installed, but this was later taken out as it was rarely used. The air group was planned to be 78, but this increased once the practice of tying up spare aircraft in the lofty heights of the hangar was adopted, with the total number rising to a maximum of 90 airframes on board. Since it was not clear at this point that aircraft would be sufficient on their own, the ships were also given 4 twin 8-inch turrets, a pair superfiring ahead and a pair superfiring behind the bridge to fight off possible surface attackers, along with 12 5-inch guns in single mounts as an anti-aircraft battery. Over their peacetime careers, various 50 caliber machine guns began to work their way on board. 5 single 3-inch guns were also installed in 1940. The two ships started to diverge at this point, with both ships receiving 5 quadruple 28mm mounts in 1941, but with Lexington having her 8-inch guns replaced by 7 additional quadruple mounts, while Saratoga had her 8-inch and 5-inch guns replaced by modern 5-inch 38 caliber guns in 1942, along with her machine guns being replaced by 20mm cannon, with 52 installed on Saratoga alongside 23 quadruple and a pair of twin 40mm mounts, replacing the 28mm mounts by the end of the war. In the 1930s, a series of fleet problem exercises saw both ships being used to help refine carrier tactics that would inform the USN's operational doctrine during the Second World War. Neither ship was present during the Pearl Harbor attack, with Lexington actually on her way to deliver fighter aircraft to Midway Island when the attack happened, with that mission cancelled when the news reached her. The war itself was a very active affair for both ships. Lexington was sent to raid the Marshall Islands to distract from Saratoga's mission to reinforce Wake Island, but this raid was cancelled when the Japanese captured Wake Island before Saratoga's mission could get there. Lexington was then ordered to attack the newly captured Wake Island, but the tanker with fuel supplies was torpedoed and sunk by the Japanese, cancelling that mission as well. Next, Lexington tried to attack the Japanese base at Ramola, only to be spotted and attacked in turn by Japanese bombers. Luckily, the base didn't have any torpedoes, and the bombs that they did have all missed. Finally, in February 1942, a successful raid was launched alongside the Yorktown, sinking and damaging a number of Japanese transport ships. Still working with the Yorktown, the Lexington would then take part in the Battle of the Coral Sea. Initially, the battle went well, with Lexington's aircraft succeeding in crippling the Japanese light carrier Shoho, which was then finished off by the Yorktown's flight group. A number of Japanese attacks were then repelled with significant Japanese losses. The next day's operation started out on a high note, with both American carriers crippling the carrier Shikaku, but the Japanese counterattack managed to score a pair of torpedo hits, followed by a pair of dive bomber hits, along with some damaging near misses. Unfortunately, the aviation fuel tanks had been breached and fumes were venting into the ship. A series of explosions through the afternoon and evening doomed the ship and started massive fires, with the ship finally going down after 5 torpedoes from a friendly destroyer were launched once the crew had been taken off. 1942 didn't start as a good year for Saratoga either. Being torpedoed by a submarine on her way to join the Enterprise, she ended up spending several months under repair before being dispatched to the Guadalcanal campaign, where she covered the landings fairly successfully. August brought about the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, with Saratoga's aircraft sinking the light carrier Ryuho and damaging a seaplane tender in exchange for heavy damage to the Enterprise. The Saratoga's air group in this engagement taking minimal losses. The rest of the war saw a series of attacks on Japanese positions, as well as covering various landings, damaging a number of Japanese ships until February 1945, when a Japanese airstrike and kamikaze attack scored multiple hits and crippled the ship. Managing to get the fires under control, they managed to make it back home for repairs, but there, Saratoga's age and the sheer number of new carriers in service meant that she was converted into a training carrier before bringing nearly 30,000 Allied personnel home at the end of the war. In 1946, she was declared surplus to requirements and used in the atomic bomb tests of Operation Crossroads. The airburst test did minor damage, but the underwater test, only 400 yards away, threw her out of the water and she sank later that day. Her wreck is only 15 meters below the surface, so if you want to, you can go and dive on it today.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.